People are busy struggling for survival. People are busy trying to find the next meal. They won't know about these things unless the media conveys them.
The global communication is dominated by Western capitals. The media is dominated by Western transnational corporations and the state agencies. That's the main source of information for Africa. It's the main source of information for our people on the continent about China. Seldom do we get direct information from China. Yes, the CGTV and a few other channels, but their capacity still does not match the myriad of platforms the West has created to influence public opinion in Africa. Stories about China that we get on the continent are distorted, twisted, where you can't even know and recognize this is the China they are talking about when you come here. The China you know out there is very different from the China that exists here. Our people are being bombarded with propaganda every day to make them hate China. Not love China, but to hate China. We are not being taught to love China. We are being taught to hate China, to be suspicious of China, to ridicule China. That has to change. They tell their story. They don't tell the Chinese story. They don't tell our story. When they talk about China, they talk about China in the way they want China to be portrayed. When they talk about Africa, they will talk about Africa in the way they want Africa to be portrayed and perceived. We have to tell our story. We need to strengthen our direct communication. We need to engage with each other directly. We need to build communication channels that are not distorted by them.
It's overwhelming. If you're an average West African, your source about international news is coming either from the BBC, CNN, or France 44. Okay. Those are your main information sources. Those are the sources that are then picked up by local broadcasters, local print media, and regurgitated. We don't have the media resources to have our own reporters in China or anywhere else in the world. So the broadcasts of these people become the basis for information and therefore the basis for discussion. I mean, it's been very, very clear this year, for example, because of the Russian operation in Ukraine, that there's a total one-sided production. As I've said, if you listen to Western media, you think that Russian soldiers are eating Ukrainian babies or something. You know it's utterly distorted. You feel uncomfortable with it. But where's the alternative? They've managed to completely block Russia Today, so you don't get those broadcasts. You get CGTN, particularly CGT on the web. It's a very competent production, but it doesn't convey a clear picture. It's lots of different stories. Yes, it covers a lot more of Africa than most of the media that dominates. But it doesn't seem to have a line. Okay, it doesn't seem to focus attention on specific issues, offer an interpretation that makes people think, aha, this is what is actually going on. This explains what I'm hearing in other places. Maybe this is a better source of information. Maybe this is the source which should found my activities, find my relationships, and where we go. So we're missing that. And it's not an accident. It's not just that, we were once colonies, so we're affected by the broadcasters sponsored by the foreign affairs establishments in the West or by private capital. There's a deliberate strategy to dominate the media space throughout the world, but particularly in Africa, and it's working. It is working. It would be a mistake for China to think that we are not the underdog in this battle. We are losing the communication war, the ideological war, because our generation, we saw it, we lived it. We know China was there fighting. We know China was there with our leaders, thinking through economic planning, thinking through options. But if you were born 30 years ago, you don't necessarily have that information. In the period of your life, China has been more or less. So what happens in the media now is important, because it's only through mass media, social and traditional, that you're going to be able to shape the way Africans see the world. And clearly, things are coming to a head. So it's important that as we reach the edge, there's clarity amongst the masses about what the issues are and therefore where we stand. It's important that the West is not able to portray, for example, the Taiwan issue as Chinese imperialism. Okay, that's very, very important. And that's the point about militarization that I was linking up to earlier. If the US is able to militarize South Korea, is able to militarize Taipei and so on, it's the same as building bases across Africa. They are being built for the purpose of surrounding, containing, and controlling the outcomes in the near and long-term future. Africans instinctively understand that this is our land. Why are you coming from God knows how many thousands of miles away to come and dictate to us how we treat our own territory? We see that happening to ourselves, so we understand what is happening in relation to China and Taiwan and so on. But it needs to be enforced. It needs to be articulated. It was very good when the embassies issued a statement on Taiwan clarifying China's position. But the position wasn't crystal clear until then. People don't actually know what the issues are. People don't even understand the history of Hong Kong. Again, our generation, we were there, we saw it happening. But younger people don't necessarily understand that Hong Kong is part of China. It's like, Britain has given Hong Kong to China. How did Britain come to acquire Hong Kong? Was this not part of the centre of humiliation? It was simply a question of relative power or military might, and China had to make concessions. But that has to be put into stories. It has to be explained. So the media question is hugely important for Africa. It's hugely important for China. And at this point in time, you have the resources. That needs to change.
When you are weak, you strengthen yourself or yourselves by uniting, by working together, by cooperating. There is need for the progressive Africa to cooperate with the Chinese communication entities so that our voice is heard, our story is heard, so that we are able to tell our own story in a more compelling way. We need to cooperate to strengthen ourselves as a matter of urgency. If we don't, even things that are straightforward, like the issue of Taiwan, will be distorted.
All you hear in Africa is Biden has said this, Biden has said that, Nancy Pelosi is going. You don't hear the Chinese side of that discourse.
We don't know the feelings of the Chinese people because it's not captured. Even if they are speaking here, they have got a position here. We need to improve our communication. If we have to be successful in mobilizing our people, in educating our people, in organizing our people, in agitating our people to wage the battles that are needed, that are necessary for their progress and for the peace of the world.
People are busy struggling for survival. People are busy trying to find the next meal. They won't know about these things unless the media conveys them. And if we allow continued dominance of the media,
again, the tide of public opinion needs to shift. Shift to the truth. And the truth is on the side of China, is on our side. One television channel, one radio station, one newspaper is not enough. We need a multiple of voices.
You're talking about almost 3 billion people, a conversation between 3 billion people. You need more channels, more instruments for doing that. That's important because, again, the propaganda has been such that there are a lot of people who have the perception that China is just one monolith. People don't know that there are different ethnic.
Yes, we appreciate that cultures need to exchange. We need to learn from each other. But also we have to appreciate where totally different cultures meet. There's a clash. And that clash has to be managed peacefully if we have to live in a peaceful world. Western culture is not the only culture. Western values are not the only values. Western values, what are the Western values? Greedy, individualism, competition, consumerism, and broad consumerism. These are the Western values on which capitalism is built. The most important of those values is individualism. These are the three values support individualism. How does equity relate to the value of individualism? There's a clash there, and that clash has to be managed. A society that is based on individualism has problems dealing with a society based on equity. But it doesn't mean we cannot exist in the same world. We have to manage our differences. This is the reality we have to face. This is the reality young people have to understand. This is the world we live in, and we cannot live on another world. We have to deal with the contradictions of this world we live in.